You are the beautiful community. Let's absolutely humiliate ourselves together by watching Trump's not most damaging, but damaging and most humiliating press conference ever, arguably, about autism. Let's do it, beautiful community.
Nothing bad can happen. It can only good happen.
Oh my God. US power in 2025.
But with Tylenol, don't take it. Don't take it. And if you can't live, if your fever is so bad, you have to take one because there's no alternative to that. Sadly, first question, what can you take instead? It's actually, there's not an alternative to that.
Can you cope with more? Let's do this.
There are parts of the world that don't take Tylenol. I mean, there's a rumor, and I don't know if it's so or not, that Cuba, they don't have Tylenol because they don't have the money for Tylenol.
Oh my God. Tylenol appeared in the Soviet Union, at least from the 60s, I think. I mean, I didn't buy Tylenol when I was in Cuba 25 years ago, paracetamol. This is an astonishing claim, which if you're a serious president and you are somehow looped into this conspiracy theory tendency, you just check. Oh, I'm tempted to think is this true? Check it for me. But Trump is not interested in checking it. It's not that he hasn't had the time to check it. He is too rigid to have it checked because that will interfere with his thought process. Things he says for Trump are like a plate for somebody who has to eat out of the same plate every day. He has the same thing he says over and over and over. And you say, well, there is some evidence that you're wrong. Why don't you say this instead? It's difficult for him. He can't do it. He has to keep eating out of the same plate. And that's why he can't check stuff he says. He just has to keep on saying it. We've seen this in so many dimensions.
And they have virtually no autism, okay? Tell me about that one. And there are other parts of the world where they don't have Tylenol.
Let's do more.
Is that a correct statement, by the way?
There are some studies that suggest that, with the Amish, for example.
The Amish. Yeah.
He's
Virtually,
asking. He's asking about what's going on, but he is asking around his need to still stick to a lane in which he repeats the same talking points. So he's saying, here's one of my talking points. Here's another one that I've just added. I'd like to keep going with it. Is this accurate? But if he were told, I don't know, he'd still keep doing it, at least in most equivalent cases.
Virtually, I heard none. See, Bobby wants to be very careful with what he says, and he should, but I'm not so careful with what I say.
So we've got RFK here elevated into being the cautious and responsible epistemic authority in this administration.
The Amish, as an example, they have essentially no autism.
Again, it's a remarkable claim that he hasn't bothered to check and doesn't really want checked, despite his turning to RFK. So what the hell is going on here? How do we react to this? I mean, I think that there are four big thoughts here. One, this just undermines expertise. We have a crisis of expertise. We have a crisis of institutions which generate expertise, themselves losing trust. We've done a lot to cause this, but calamities like this clown show only make it worse. So the effect here is that a hypothetically responsible future president of the United States could try to make a responsible conference, presser, about public health, but their credibility will be undermined by the fact that this has happened before. So there's a kind of a disinhibiting effect, the permanent chink you take out of public discourse when you organize clown shows like this. They just degrade the country's capacity to have a collective conversation that is still somewhat tethered to available expertise. The second takeaway I've got from this is that the United States just looks ludicrous. It's embarrassing. Now, this is a domestic policy issue, so you think it shouldn't affect US standing in the world, but it does. It does, because the United States looks non-credible and not predictable for allies watching this. And the psychological, if not the practical tendency when you see this is to want to decouple from the United States. Now, the truth is that, in fact, the West is itself busy catching up to itself normalizing these kinds of clown shows. So that's unfortunately the trend. But there we are. Now, the third takeaway is that we have a lot of autistic people in our societies. We have autistic people doing utterly remarkable things, like Wittgenstein or Mozart. But we also have, a whole range of autistic experience, including some people struggling enormously with their autism. And so what we need to do is deepen our understanding, not just be evidence-based, unlike these fools, but actually to deepen our evidence base, right? We need to learn so much more about the biology of autism. We need to learn so much more about the experience of autistic people, right? There's so many parents around the world right now struggling with autistic children, and the parents themselves might plausibly be autistic in that instance too. Many people watching this have a high chance of having several autistic people in their lives, and often you won't know they're autistic and they won't know they're autistic. Because for all of the enormous rise in diagnosis, we still have, in my view, an overwhelming number of people who are not diagnosed and a very, very poor level of social understanding. One of the most recurrent personal messages I get is a highly confident and highly ignorant message about neurodiversity. Don't say that, don't say this about neurodiversity, don't talk about it at all. And that's often written by people who just don't know anything. And we need to end this culture where people who don't know anything about neurodiversity talk about it in public. In the UK, we've got obscenities like the intellectual entertainer Peter Hitchens, who doesn't know anything about ADHD, writing an article saying that ADHD doesn't exist. And so the effect of this kind of presser is not just that it doesn't help us grow our knowledge about autism, it doesn't help us understand the experience of autistic people, doesn't help us include autistic people, doesn't help us constructively take advantage of the extraordinary gifts they have. It even disincentivizes the very idea of seriously engaging with autism. Because the effect of this press conference is to replace the thirst for exploration and understanding of autism among neurotypical people by just memes and slogans and dodgy lines of misinformation that are going to proliferate across the internet as a result of this presser. Final remark. It's not something I'll legislate on too much now, but you can't watch this and not raise the question of whether or not our culture might need a debate about whether Trump himself might not have autism. And it's very important that this is a highly necessary element that is missing in our public discourse. Talking in general about whether a particular politician has or does not have a neurodiversity, and what kind of neurodiversity they have if they do, and how that neurodiversity works for them, and their level of awareness or lack of awareness about it. Now, you don't want to do that for your neighbor or other members of society, but when people wield enormous power in a way that is absolutely inflected through their neurodiversity, we have to talk about this. Otherwise, we have almost comical situations like the beautiful Rory Stewart and Alistair Campbell on their platform, The Rest is Politics, talking for months on end about why the behavior of the ex-UK Prime Minister Liz Truss is so strange, when in reality, if they had more insight into neurodiversity, they'd be able to have a much more accurate and deeper conversation about what's actually going on. So, point one, this raises the issue of the legitimacy of discourse about the neurodiversity of politicians. And secondly, this raises a particular question about this particular politician. I'm not going to legislate on it now, even though I have discussed Trump's psychology elsewhere, and Trump's neurology elsewhere, and there, when I made the main channel video about his narcissism, I talked not only about his narcissism, but briefly about interactions of narcissism and ADHD too. That's all I've got for now. Thank you for bearing with me, but I just thought that as difficult to digest as this fourth point is, I wanted to make it, because in the end, you don't want your eyes closed to 5 or 7 percent of the social and political experience around you. I don't mean here that that's the rate of prevalence. I'm not talking about that. I just mean how much politics gets inflected by actions that are taken by neurodiverse actors, but actions which have very significant transformational power and which we need to analyze and critique. Lots and lots of love, but above all, lots of love to my autistic brothers and sisters. I'm just so sorry you've been dragged through the mud. I don't have neurodiversity myself, but I have close personal knowledge of it, as well as always extending my knowledge of it through reading research. So you're not sisters and brothers in the sense that I share your neurodiversity. I don't, but I'm always out on a mission to understand it more deeply and talk about it more responsibly. Lots of love.